I walked 10 miles through a blizzard to save my job, but when I arrived, my boss fired me on the spot for being late. Little did he know the box I was clutching was the only thing keeping the CEO's daughter alive.
Welcome. We truly appreciate you joining Dawson's journey. Your support fuels these stories. Let's dive into today's story.
I could feel my heart slowing down, matching the rhythm of the freezing wind. Most people think a blizzard is loud, but when you're in the middle of it, it's a terrifying silence. I looked down at my hands. They were white, almost translucent against the black handle of the medical cooler. I knew that if I stopped moving for even 60 seconds, the snow would become my blanket and I'd never wake up. Every step was a battle between my will to live and the weight of the secret I was carrying for a girl I'd never even met.
Dawson, the hospital just called for the third time. They're losing her stability.
I'm at the perimeter fence. My car is in a ditch back on Highway 4. My legs are failing me, but I've still got the box.
If you aren't at the warehouse gates in 5 minutes, they're calling off the transplant.
Just tell the surgeons to keep her heart beating.
Tell him I'm almost there!
I clicked the radio off before she could hear me gasp for air. I didn't need sympathy, I needed traction. I threw my shoulder against the heavy chain-link gate, the metal groaning under a layer of ice. As I stumbled toward the loading docks, I saw the bright, artificial lights of the manager's office burning through the dark. For a second, I felt a wave of relief. I thought I was walking into safety. I had no idea I was walking into a trap set by a man who valued his ego more than a human life.
Dawson's 10-mile walk was brutal. Did you expect him to make it? Like this video if you admire his pure grit.
The heavy steel door groaned as I shoved it open, letting in a swirl of ice and snow that skated across the polished concrete floor. The sudden warmth of the warehouse should have felt like a blessing, but under the harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights, it felt like a spotlight on my failure. I stood there, dripping, my boots leaving dark, muddy puddles on the pristine floor. I was trembling so hard I could hear my teeth chattering, but my eyes were locked on the office window above the loading dock. The silhouette of my manager was already standing there, a shadow against the yellow light, watching me like a hawk.
Look at you, Dawson. You look like something a stray dog dragged in. I specifically told the team last night.
Weather is no excuse for a lapse in professionalism. Do you have any idea what time it is?
The morning. Current shift started 20 minutes ago. My floor is now a mess, and you're standing there like a statue. Sir, the roads are impassable. I had to hike 3 miles with the medical cooler because the courier truck couldn't
Make the grade. This box needs to be logged and sent to the helipad immediately. People are waiting.
I held the cooler out, my frozen fingers trembling under the weight, expecting him to reach for it. Instead, crossed his arms over his expensive company vest, a smirk playing on his lips that made my blood run colder than the blizzard outside. He didn't care about the biohazard sticker or the urgency in my voice. To him, this wasn't a life-saving mission, it was a power struggle. He looked at the mud on his floor, then back at me, and I realized in that moment that I wasn't dealing with a leader. I was dealing with a man who was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Shannon, the manager of the warehouse, didn't just want to punish me, he wanted an audience. He whistled loudly, signaling the rest of the morning crew to stop their forklifts and gather around. I stood in the center of the loading dock, a frozen spectacle of mud and ice, clutching the medical cooler like a shield. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me, some filled with pity, others with the cold fear that they might be next. The silence in the warehouse was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drip of melting ice from my jacket hitting the floor. He took a slow circle around me, sniffing the air as if I were trash he'd found in the dumpster.
The rules don't apply. In this company, a hero is someone who clocks in at 6 a.m. sharp.
Give me your badge. You're done. I don't hire martyrs, I hire professionals. Get out of my sight.
Sir, listen. Forget the job. Just take the box. The hospital is waiting for the signature. Please, just sign.
If this stays here, a little girl on the transplant list dies. Just sign the log and I'll go.
He laughed a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the high corrugated ceiling. He didn't even look at the cooler. He just pointed his finger toward the loading bay doors I had just struggled to open. The injustice of it felt like a physical blow to my chest, more painful than the frostbite setting into my toes. I looked at the faces of my friends, but they all looked away, too afraid to lose their own paychecks to stand up for the truth. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting the weather anymore. I was fighting a monster in a designer fleece who had no idea his own world was about to collapse. I didn't move. My feet felt like they were rooted into the concrete, fused there by a mixture of frozen mud and pure, unadulterated defiance. The warehouse manager's face shifted from a smirk to a mask of pure confusion, then quickly into a deep vein-popping rage. He wasn't used to the disposable workers talking back, let alone standing their ground after being discarded. The warehouse heaters hummed overhead, but the air between us was electric. I could see my own reflection in his polished safety glasses, a broken, shivering man who had finally found something worth losing everything for.
I thought I made myself clear, Dawson. You don't work here anymore. You are trespassing on private property. Do you understand?
If you don't drop that box and walk out those doors in the next 10 seconds, I'm calling the cops right now. I'll make sure you spend the night in a holding cell instead of a warm bed. This is your very last warning. Call them. Call the cops, call the National Guard, call whoever you want, Shannon. But I am not moving an inch tonight.
I'm not moving until a medical professional signs for this delivery. My job is over, but my responsibility is not yet finished.
You can take my badge, but you can't take my conscience. I am staying right here until that girl gets her delivery.
He reached for the radio on his belt, his knuckles white with fury. I knew he was bluffing about the cop. He didn't want the paperwork or the scandal, but he was desperate to regain control in front of the crew. I looked past him toward the main office doors, praying for a miracle or a sign that the hospital's tracking system had alerted the upper levels. My vision was starting to blur at the edges from the exhaustion, but I tightened my grip on the cooler. I was a fired man with nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous person in the room. While Shannon was busy puffing out his chest and playing the dictator, 3 miles away, a different kind of storm was happening. I could almost see it in my mind. The bright, sterile lights of the ICU, the frantic beeping of monitors, and the pale face of a little girl whose life was measured in minutes, not hours. I knew the surgeon was likely standing over her, his gloved hands empty, waiting for the contents of the cooler I was holding. Every time the warehouse manager opened his mouth to insult me, he was stealing a breath from a child. The weight of that reality was crushing, but it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing onto the floor. He reached for the main console to cut the line, his ignorance finally reaching its peak.
Is anyone there? This is the emergency coordinator at St. Jude's. Our GPS shows the courier has arrived at the hub.
But no one is answering the emergency line. We have a patient on the table and her vitals are dropping, please. If you can hear this, we need that box now.
Who the hell is that? Dawson, is that your phone? I told you, no personal calls on the floor. I'm hanging this up and calling the authorities. You're causing a massive disruption.
He didn't even listen to the name of the hospital or the urgency in the coordinator's voice. To him, the loud, desperate plea was just noise interfering with his authority. I watched his hand hover over the button, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel fear. I felt a terrifying sense of clarity. He wasn't just a bad boss, he was a catastrophe. I knew that in a few seconds, the doors behind him were going to open, and the world he had built on ego was going to be torn apart by the truth. The back loading doors didn't just open, they were thrown back with such force that the metal slammed against the concrete walls like a gunshot. A gust of the frozen night air reclaimed the room, but it wasn't the cold that made everyone freeze. It was the man standing in the doorway. Handerson, the CEO, wasn't wearing a warehouse vest or a safety helmet. He was wrapped in a tailored black wool coat, his hair matted by the snow, and his eyes wide with a level of terror I had never seen in a boardroom executive. Behind him, 2 men in suits struggled to keep up, but he didn't wait for them. He scanned the room like a predator looking for a lifeline.
Where is it? The tracker says the medical cooler is in this bay.
Why isn't the transport team on the roof? Every second you waste is a second my daughter doesn't have.
Tell me right now that the package is secure!
Mr. Handerson, I didn't know you were coming. There's been a misunderstanding. This employee, Dawson, he showed up late, causing a scene. I was just in the middle of escorting him out and disposing of his...
The manager's voice trailed off into a pathetic whimper as the warehouse owner's gaze shifted from him to me. He looked at my blue, shaking lips, the ice still clinging to my eyelashes, and then his eyes fell on the cooler I was clutching against my chest. The silence that followed was deafening. The entire warehouse crew held their breath. In that moment, the hierarchy of the company didn't matter. The millions of dollars in the bank didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the 3 feet of space between a father's desperation and a disposable man's grit. The CEO didn't wait for an explanation. He lunged forward, his expensive leather shoes clicking frantically against the concrete, and reached for the cooler. As my fingers finally let go, a sharp, searing pain shot up my arms. The blood was finally rushing back into my frozen joints. I watched as he placed the box on a nearby crate, his hand shaking so violently he could barely work the latch. The manager stood paralyzed, his face a ghostly shade of gray. The arrogance that had defined him for years had evaporated, replaced by the terrifying realization that he hadn't just fired a worker, he had tried to sabotage his own boss's family in their darkest hour.
Handerson's respect for Dawson changed everything. Comment below, what would you have done? Subscribe now to see how this legacy of integrity grows.
It's here. It's still cold. Did I hear you correctly? Were you escorting the only man who cared enough to walk through a blizzard for my daughter? Were you calling this life-saving medicine trash? Mr. Handerson, I swear, he didn't say. He just said he is late. I've always wanted to try to maintain this for company standards. Dawson, tell him I was just doing my job. Your job is over, Shannon. Don't bother going back to your office. Security will mail you your personal items. If my daughter pulls through this, you can thank Dawson that I'm not filing criminal charges for reckless endangerment. Get out now.
I watched the fired man walk towards the same doors he had just tried to force me through. He looked small. Without the title and the vest, he was just a bitter man who had lost everything because he couldn't see the value in a human being. The warehouse crew parted like the Red Sea as he passed, no one offering a word of comfort or a goodbye. As the heavy steel doors slammed behind him, the silence returned, but it was different now. The corporate storm was over. I felt a warm hand on my shoulder, and for the first time in 10 miles, I let myself breathe. I had lost my job, but I had found my soul. The medical helicopter lifted off from the roof 10 minutes later, its blades cutting through the thinning snow like a promise of a new day. I sat on a stack of pallets, wrapped in a heavy wool blanket the warehouse owner had fetched from the helicopter. The heat in the warehouse didn't feel harsh anymore. It felt like a homecoming. My coworkers, the same ones who had looked away in fear, were now bringing me hot coffee and shaking my hand. I didn't blame them for their silence earlier. Fear is a powerful cage. But as I watched the sunrise begin to bleed gold across the white horizon, I realized that the blizzard hadn't just tested my legs, it had stripped away everything fake to reveal what truly mattered.
I looked for talent in ivory towers and Ivy League schools. I was wrong. True leadership isn't found in a title. It's found in a man who walks 10 miles in a storm for someone who can never pay him back. Shannon's office is empty. I want you to take it. Not as a manager, but as our director of logistics. We need a heart like yours at the center of this organization. I didn't do it for the office. Mr. Handerson, I did it because I know what it's like to be waiting for a miracle. I'll take the job, but only if we change the rules. In my department, we don't look at the clock first. We look at the person.
I've been in that corner office for 5 years now, and every time it snows, I look out that gate and remember the man who stood there with frozen fingers and a fired heart. The world will often try to tell you you are disposable, that your grit doesn't matter, and that the Shannons of the world hold all the cards. Don't believe them. Integrity is a currency that never devalues, and character is a fire that no blizzard can put out. Stay cold-blooded in your work, but stay warm-hearted in your soul. because you never know when the box you're carrying is the very thing that will save the world that tried to cast you out.
5 years later, Dawson is leading with heart. Is integrity still the best currency? Like if you agree with his rules. The storm finally ended. Did the ending inspire you? Subscribe for more stories about character, purpose, and the miracles we carry.